critters in my house are feeling a little lazy this morning, which I don't blame them. I feel the same way. So it's kind of feeling like a good morning to take a few moments to lie down and relax and breathe. So we're gonna start out laying down on our back. Oh, by the way, forgot this part. Welcome. It's a morning time gentle yoga class today. So you might have, I'm just gonna go through a couple of yoga props real quick that I'm gathered around here. So I've got a blanket. This is a wool blanket, but you can use any blanket as long as you can, it's a reasonable size and easy to work with. So you can roll your blanket up and use that either under your back or under your legs if you like. You could use some throw pillows like these underneath your legs, or if you happen to have something like a yoga bolster, you could certainly use that instead, either under your back or under your legs. And then I've got a strap. If you don't have a yoga strap per se, anything like a scarf or a dog leash or a belt will work fine. It's just to extend the length of your arm so that you have something to work with. If you can make a loop in your strap, whether you tie it or you run it through a buckle, loops are helpful, I think, especially if your hands are just a little bit arthritic or just have trouble holding on with a grip. Loops can be really useful for a variety of reasons, but in any case. And then I've got this spare blanket here that I like to put underneath my head, or if it's chilly in the morning, I might cover up with it. So if you have some extra little throw blankets or little throw pillows laying around your house, you could kind of throw those close by, just in case you want to have an extra prop or a little bit of extra support. So I'm going to start with this blanket underneath my legs, and I'm just going to lie down on the floor so that my upper back is just relaxed on the ground. So that's where I'm going to begin. Again, you can use a variety of props, whatever you have at your house will work. So, I put the blanket pretty close to the very tippy top here to start with, and then if it feels like it would be better pushed back a little bit, it's easier for me to do that than to try to drag it all the way up from underneath my knees. So it's usually for me a little easier to start closer to the top and then work my way down. And you can move your body instead of the prop too, if you've got room in your house for those kinds of shenanigans. Some of us might be trying to squeak our practice in between a couple of large pieces of furniture or wall and a bed or something like that. So you just work with what space you've got. And then I just took a moment to sort of snuggle my shoulder blades in underneath me and figure out where my arms should land. And sometimes it's comfortable for me to do like more of a cactus shape or a T with the arm, or a little closer to the body. So you're just going to find the spot that works best for you. And then lie down for a moment and pay attention. And there's lots of different places to pay attention. So the first thing that I'm noticing is just my posture. And like, does my chin tuck up or tuck down? Does it feel like my low back arches more than it should? By should, I just mean more than it would if I were standing upright. Just try to adjust with props or adjust with movement your body so that it feels as neutral as if you were standing up. And then if you have got props underneath your back, of course there'll be a slight change there, but otherwise. And then once you've made the little adjustments, so it feels like you're mostly stable, as close as you can get anyway, then you're going to take nice deep breaths. Notice if your breath pattern is such that your breath kind of leg lifts your belly button. Or do you feel the movement more in your rib cage? So we're going to take 2 more big breaths. Now, take a moment, and if you've got something underneath your upper back, you're going to take that out from underneath you. I am going to kind of just bring my feet onto the floor, and then I'll slide that guy out from underneath my legs. I could leave it there probably for a few moments, but it'll give me a little more range of motion to take it out. So then my feet are maybe a little bit on the wider side, but pretty close to hips distance apart. And I'm just sort of windshield wipering the legs back and forth. And this is a little bit tighter position, so they kind of move, I would suggest maybe halfway or 2/3 of the way from either side. Now, if I wiggle them out a little wider, then my legs can drop kind of a little more into the center, and it takes my pelvis with it. And I get a little bit more motion there, a little more internal rotation. And that feels kind of interesting and cool. So if you want to widen your legs out, you could do it that way, or you could keep it a little bit more towards the center. Now, we're going to take the right foot and put it up on top of the left, or the right ankle, I guess, really, and put it up on top of the left thigh. So that there is a little bit of freedom of movement with the ankle joint. So I've just sort of stacked the legs. If for any reason you need to change this, or you want to support the left leg with a pillow instead, you could certainly do that. Just make sure you can give your right foot a little bit of room to move. So we're going to spin the right foot in circles. And then we're going to go the other direction with the circles. And then we'll point and flex a bit. Stage 1 is to bring this right leg in and just hang on to it, and then stretch the left leg out. Now, if you feel a stretch on the front of your left hip, then you are done, because that's what we're after. So you just reach out through that left leg. If you don't feel a stretch on the front of that left hip, reach in here and see if you can get hold of your foot, and then bring this leg more to the right. And that will lift you a little bit more on your left side, and hopefully will give you the room you need to get this little extra bit of stretch right here through the hip flexors. If that still isn't enough, pull your thigh all the way down to the floor, and then really reach out. Because the left leg is lifted, this leg has a little bit more of a drop into that stretch. So somewhere in that range should be a stretch that will work for you. We're going to just reach out through that left leg. Give that front of your left hip a nice stretch. And I'm kind of drawing kind of up through the side of my waist just to pull it in both directions. Got an active leg, my foot is active, I'm spreading out my toes. Last big breath there on that left side. And then we're going to release the pressure. We're not quite done here yet, but what you may want to do is go ahead and just give that left hip flexor area, just a little bit of a release. You can even take your pillow or your blanket and put it back underneath that leg just to provide a little bit of extra support in the event that that would be helpful. And I'm gonna pull that all the way across. So then you're gonna take your strap and we're gonna wrap that around the ball of the foot. And again, you can use the loopy part by putting your hand through it. It's a little less work on the finger joints themselves, or you can certainly just hold onto the strap, even wrap the strap around your wrist one time. So that's really up to you as to how the comfort level of holding onto your, if you've got a scarf and you've got two ends of the scarf, you could wrap both ends around or tie a knot in them to create a loop. So that's up to you. Oops. Now, once you've got your leg lassoed and it keeps it lassoed, then you can kind of try some slightly different movements. You can rotate the leg out or in, you can pull the toes down and push up on the heel, or let the toes go up a little higher. You can bend your knee or straighten your leg out. And we'll stay for about another minute here, just a wee bit shy of a minute more. Now, sometimes that stretch is quite, if you haven't stretched out yet, this could be a little on the spicy side. So you can back off of this pose by letting your leg get further away or by bending at the knee. So we're going to take 2 more big breaths. So we're taking the leg out to the side. Now, before I did that, I pulled this blanket really close up under around that hip, just to give myself a little bit of a place for my femur bone to land, so that I could keep this left hip a little more stable on the floor. You can also work a little bit more through your deep core by really pulling that left hip toward the ground. And that gives you a little extra core work. Who doesn't like extra core work? Right? Everybody likes extra core work. At least I'm pretty sure everybody likes extra core work. What's not to like? Again, you can bend at the knee, you can adjust the leg a little bit. I don't have quite as big a range of motion in terms of the spin here when my leg is out to the side, but I've got a little bit of room. I'm definitely bending at the knee, and straightening the leg is one way to control the intensity of the stretch. So we'll take about another 30 seconds or so here. All right, yogis. So we'll take a nice big breath, and then we'll come on back to the center and release this leg. Now, we're gonna just set the strap off to the side for a moment. We're not quite done yet with this right leg, but we're gonna bend the knee, and then we're gonna take the leg across into a twist. Now, what you can do is you can stack your left leg right up underneath that right leg, so that there's a little bit more support, or you can take your blanket or your pillow and kind of pull that over so you have a place for your legs to land. Or you can let that left leg stay extended out. You can certainly rest your left hand on that knee. I'm just going to let gravity kind of hang on to that, and I'm going to adjust my upper back as level as possible. And now as I extend out through my right arm, because I'm letting my legs kind of fall to the left, I'm going to find a little bit of a stretch here along my pectoralis muscle. Now, I'm going to use just my core to do this little bit of extra. So I'm going to try to spin my legs a little bit more to the left as I spin my upper back a little more to the floor to create this twist, and then also to have a little bit more active muscle here engaged in moving in these two different directions. And again, we'll stay for a little bit here. Take a nice deep breath. This is a little bit more effortful than the pose with the straps, but I think it's interesting. You can, of course, get a little more relaxed if you like. Alright, yogis, we're going to stay for about 30 more seconds. If this gets too spicy around your chest, you can back it off a little bit. I like this really actively trying to roll through my upper back, keeping that torso as stable as possible. Taking a nice big breath, and then we'll come back to the center. Oh, there we go. So, take a moment just to let yourself, again, do these little windshield wiper moves. Again, they can be a little closer or a little wider apart, just depending on how it feels to you. And then allow yourself to just pause for a moment, stretch out. Feel how your body lands. Does one side feel a little different than the other? Is there a more pleasant sensation on one side than the other? It's possible that there's no difference. There usually is for me, though. All right, so I'm keeping this blanket handy, but for now, I'm going to come back to this position where my right leg is on the floor, and I'm going to take my left ankle and just pop it up on top of there. And then I'm going to spin this foot in circles. Go the other direction if you haven't already. Point and flex. Now this is the part where we're going to take a couple of little moves and just see what happens. So first move is grab the leg, stretch the right side out. If I'm already having some friction, some resistance is really the word I'm looking for, I think, to stretching that leg out all the way straight, this might be plenty. So feeling that kind of hip flexor stretch, and again, that might be enough, and sometimes that is enough for me. Or you can grab hold of the foot, and that, by kind of pulling the weight a little bit more over to the side, might give you a little bit more room to stretch here. Or you can take this knee all the way to the ground, and that's going to give you a ton of room to stretch into that kind of, it's like lunging upside down, but you know, the pressure, instead of being in the knee or somewhere else, might be really kind of focused a little more fully on this hip flexor. I don't know for sure. You're going to have to figure that out. Let's see what happens. See how it's working for you. And we'll take 2 more breaths here. Good. So then you're going to let yourself kind of release that shape. And you can do a little bit of movement, a little bit of release in this hip before we get to the full kind of sequence that we're going to do with this strap. So I'm just kind of organizing my blanket. I'm going to let this right leg relax. I'm going to take this strap and wrap it around the left foot. And we'll extend extend out. Okay, so I've got a little bit more, for me anyway, a little bit tighter muscle on one side than the other, so I might have to make some adjustments. So I've got a little bit more room. So I just have to make a few adjustments to the shape that you're doing, and then we're going to let this right leg, as best I can, kind of hang out relaxed there. Oh, I might have to make some adjustments in terms of my space requirements as well as we go along. But for now, just pausing here with the shape and breathing. And again, you could do these little bits of play of bending the knee and straightening the leg, a little rotation, pulling the toes down, backing off, all of those to kind of give yourself a sense of all the little nuances of the muscles of the backs of the legs. And maybe their relationship to each other as well. So we stay for about 30 more seconds. Take a really big breath, and then we're going to go out to the side. And again, because I have this little piece of furniture, I'm just going to turn myself a little on the diagonal, and I think that'll give me a tiny bit more room. Yeah. So I have a little bit more space for my hip to hang out here with this stretch. And for you, like, make whatever adjustments you need to for your space. So we've got about 30 more seconds here, please. All right, take a big breath, and then we're going to come on back to the center. We're going to release ourselves from the strap, and again, we're going to take the leg over into the twist. And again, you have some options here, leaving the leg straight, or bending that knee, or adding a little support along with that. So I'm going to do kind of a little bit of both. I'm going to put a little blanket there, I'm going to bend that knee, and then I'm going to let that leg hook over, and then let gravity do its work with letting those legs kind of fall for a second while I get my upper back onto the ground. And then I'm going to be a little more active. So I'm going to actively, and I'm using my abdominal muscles mostly, to kind of pull myself into the twist in both directions. And it's an interesting idea, right? That I'm going to use some muscles in my upper back area along with some of my abdominals to turn in two different directions. That way with the hip and that way with the shoulder. So just kind of feeling yourself into, like, do you just want to relax into gravity, or is this kind of slightly more active twist more interesting? And it's really just a choice on a daily basis. There's no right or wrong to any of this. There's just, we're making a choice and then we're checking out what happens. slightly more than 30 seconds once you get the notion. So give yourself a little bit of a rinse, shoulders, upper back, hips, all those places. And then eventually give yourself a nice big stretch. Oh. And then again, just for a moment, just pause there and feel where it landed you. I really get into this kind of feeling of my hips, or my hips and my legs and my low back all sort of feeling a little bit softer. There's just a little sense that the area has been relaxed, if that's the right word. It's nice. I enjoy it. So we're going to come to a seated position, so you can take your time getting there, but eventually we'll kind of roll ourselves into a seated position. Now if you want to rock up, that's fine. You can do it that way too. I'm going to be a little bit more kind of lazy about it and get there eventually. Now I'm going to keep this blanket that I had earlier. I'm just going to open it up a little bit wider. And this comes in handy for me because I tend to hyperextend my knees. Now, when blankets are folded, they often have edges that are a little like the loose flappy ends, and then they've got the folded ends. And so just be mindful of when you're folding your blanket of making it as smooth as you can. And then in areas where you want more support, you're going to put the folded edges, and in areas where there's support isn't that big a deal, you can have the looser ends. For my purposes, for the seated version, I'm just going to try to get an even amount of blanket under each knee. So I'm going to roll the blanket up. And then if I kind of feel down the length of it, I can kind of feel where there's a little less support. So I'm going to try to put this area where there's a lot of support in, that's the area I'm going to put under my knees. So you just kind of feel it out with your blanket too. Okay. Now, I'm starting with my legs in a V shape. They don't have to be a big V. It's just, could be, whatever size V is appropriate for you. Again, you don't have to have this blanket under your knees. You may want to sit on a blanket. For me, this is just a nice way to keep my knees from doing things they ought not do. And then it's also useful if you have really tight hamstrings, or the relationship between your hip and your knee is a little bit on the tighter side. You can actually put more support under so the knee is a little more bent, and that will be helpful. So we've got the knees out in a V, but I'm not going to leave them that way exactly. So we're going to pick one leg and bend it. So I'm going to let the right leg stay straight, and I'm going to bend my left knee. And so now I may want to adjust the support a little bit so that there's more support under the thigh, and leave this support under the knee. Okay, so just make sure that the support feels like it's the right amount for you. And then we're going to fold straight down the center. So rather than leaning towards this knee or towards this leg, I'm going to fold down the middle here. Now that I'm folded down the middle, I'm going to get a little more active in this right leg. So I'm going to rotate that leg. So I'm going to engage this inner thigh so that I rotate the leg so the toes point straight up. I'm going to gently bend a little bit at that knee, and to do that, I'm pressing my heel into the ground and then bending this knee, so I'm engaging my quadriceps quite a bit. And then as I fold, I can reach out here with my hand and either grab the side of my foot, or I can choose to grab my big toe. Now, if when I reach out, I can't get hold of this foot, then that's where the strap can come back into play. So I could wrap the strap around my foot and then pull on the strap and push into it with my foot so that I get this resistance, okay? So I happen to have the choice to do any of these three. Hold my foot, hold my big toe, hold the strap. I'm going to choose the big toe for today. So I'm going to press a little bit into my hand and pull a little bit so I've got resistance. It's almost like I'm pushing on a gas pedal that's got a little bit of firmness to it. And then I'm going to lengthen through my breastbone. So rather than let my back round with this shape, I'm going to try to get almost into a cobra-like shape in my upper back. Okay, so I've got a lot of activity going on. Inner thigh is rotating, quadriceps are active, I'm pressing my foot into the ground, I'm pulling on and resisting that pull with my leg. Lots of fun things going on. Oh, and by the way, did I mention that we're breathing deeply? So we're going to keep breathing as deeply as possible, working with all of this activity. And then notice, like, are the two sides of your back the same? Mine aren't. So we're going to take 2 more breaths here. All right, so now we're going to let go of the resistance, and then we're going to come all the way back up. And just pause for a moment and notice where you landed. And I was using a lot of muscle around my hips and in my thighs. And so there's definitely an interesting sensation there. Now I'm going to turn towards this bent knee and I'm going to side bend out over this right leg. And again, I'm going to get a little more active with this. So I'm going to go back to holding onto my big toe. You could just as easily hold the foot, or you could hold the inside edge of the foot if you like. So turning towards my left, I'm going to side bend a little bit, then get a little longer and side bend again. I'm going to let my elbow almost sort of work with my shin bone to kind of press into each other as I'm pushing and pulling a bit with this hand. And then I'm going to extend this arm out, and as I lift this arm, I am rotating it so that my pinky keeps working its way into the inside, kind of towards the ground as I bring it up and over. So I'm lengthening through the spine, reaching out through the side waist, and reaching out through the arm as well, with this arm bone positioned in such a way that my pinky finger winds up on the bottom. Now that's an intentional choice. It's not the only choice. It just happens to be the one I'm making right now, and creating this length as I side bend, and a lot of activity in the legs, as well as this arm. And we're going to stay for a few more breaths. One more. Now, I'm going to use my arm to help bring myself out, let go of my toe, lift everything, and then again, I'm going to let everything get a little soft and a little relaxed. And my back still feels like it's side bending this way, so until that subsides, I'm going to just maintain this seated position. I've straightened out this leg just to give myself a little jiggle. It usually takes for me about 30 seconds for my spine to kind of redistribute all the fluid. And there might still be like a little bit of movement that would be good, like a little washing machine movement or some back and forth kind of cat-cowy shapes. All right, I'm going back to this left knee being bent, but we're gonna do a little different pose with it. So I've still got a V, and then I'm gonna rotate my torso into a twist. Now, I'm gonna see if I can reach around this outside knee. It may not be comfortable for everyone, so you can certainly grab the ankle or even just hold on with the hands. My back hand doesn't reach the floor very well, so I'm gonna really extend my fingers, but holding steady here, I'm gonna notice if I'm leaning off of my sit bone, I wanna put the weight back there and then bring the torso right up over the pelvis, so that I'm not leaning into it, but instead really focusing the twist just in my upper back. Now, I did the reclining twist really active. Now that I've got myself in position here, I'm going to try to relax a little bit more and just let the pose hold itself up as I take deep breaths. So we're just going to progressively kind of fiddling with these poses. I let go because that feels a little too much. I can just let everything get a little bit softer. We'll take about 2 more breaths here. And then unwind the pose with your exhale. And again, pause for a moment because the spine will have redistributed fluid in a certain way to make that pose possible. And so we'll just let it put it back where it belongs. And notice the impacts on the body. And again, you can straighten that leg out if you like, just to give yourself a little rinse, or even bend this other leg if that's better. One of the things I'm really interested in just kind of watching the practice for myself is this kind of line between allowing the pose and being a little more intense, a little more intentional about how the pose works. So I can just kind of position my bones and relax, or I can really kind of be a little bit more intentional, a little more forceful with the shape. And I think it's an interesting thing to do to sort of explore both of those notions. So we have another side to do, and so we're gonna do the other side. So I'm gonna bend my right leg and the left leg's gonna be straight. And again, my thighs are a little bit in this V. I just now have to reposition my support so that it's in the spot that feels like it's gonna give me the best support in general. Again, I'm folding down the center. Again, I'm gonna be really intentional and quite muscular, quite yang, if you will, in the way that I'm gonna approach this pose with my body. So once I'm folding here, again, I can grab my big toe or the side of my foot, or I can use a strap. But some of us only have one choice. Just pick the choice that's gonna be best for you. Whatever it is, it's the same idea, is that we're gonna use the positioning of the hand, whether it's on the foot or on a strap on the foot, to create this kind of structure, okay? So it's almost like I'm pushing on a gas pedal, but then there's resistance because I'm pulling at the same time. I'm bending this knee a little bit, letting this heel dig in just a notch so I can really engage through my quads. And these are the muscles on the top of the thigh. So I'm getting the top of the thigh muscles, almost like I'm trying to pick up my kneecap. Really active. That allows my hamstrings to let go a little bit because these muscles have an antagonistic relationship. That's the technical word, antagonist. But really they're reciprocal because they work together to create movement in the body. But technically they're called antagonists, which I find interesting, but in any case. And then again, I've got my breastbone lifted, I'm trying to bring my pelvis forward, I'm creating a little bit of structure in the length of my back as well. And we're gonna stay here for about 3 more breaths. So I've got a super active pose. And we'll contrast this with another pose in a few moments. But I find it really interesting to approach the practice differently on given different days and with different notions. Same pose, just approached differently, can bring you a whole bunch of information. Okay, so we're gonna take a big breath, let go of everything, come on up. And again, you can kind of let everything relax a little bit for a second before we side bend. So I'm gonna turn just a notch. I just let that sit bone get slightly forward. This just keeps my rib cage from cramping up. So if I kind of adjust my pelvis a little bit, it gives me a little bit less resistance in a way that feels really crummy. Okay, so rather than just kind of collapse into the side, I'm gonna lengthen. I'm gonna kind of shoot myself out there. Again, I'm gonna use my hand here to create this space. And I'm gonna go ahead and grip my big toe with 3 fingers instead of just 2 for this. So I'm gonna lengthen out, rotate my ribs a little, and now I'm gonna start to work with my arms. So I've got a bend in this knee, I'm pushing on that gas pedal, I've got my thigh really active, I'm actively lengthening through my spine, and then I'm gonna start to bring this arm over my head, and as I bring it, I'm gonna keep rotating my arm bone so that it feels interesting, and that pinky's on the bottom, and this allows me some access to my latissimus dorsi muscle in my back that I find really nice. There's other muscles too, they're all connected. But I can really feel that stretch go all the way down to my waist. So I know that's the muscle that I'm accessing. As it goes right into the connective tissue of my low back. And again, we're doing this in a nice active way, really sort of allowing ourselves some space here, but actively getting engaged with it. We're going to take 2 more big breaths. and get ourselves out of there. Ooh. One of the things I find really interesting too is like the more active my pose, often the more tension I'll bring into my face, or the less deeply I breathe. That might be the right word. Less fully. Anyway, like my breathing pattern will shallow a little bit when I am really, really engaging muscle. And so I have to bring a little bit more awareness to that as well, which I find really interesting. Okay, so now we're going to turn this into a twist. And so again, I don't want to, when I turn here, I don't want to lean up or off my sit bone to create the twist. I'm going to try to keep my pelvis nice and steady. You're welcome to pick up this knee if that's a little better for you. And then we're going to turn. And again, I can feel myself already trying to lean out of this hip. So I'm going to try to stay heavy there and bring myself around. And again, you can reach your arm all the way around here if that seems okay. I'm going to let this pose get a little bit more passive. So I'm going to let this leg get a little soft, just so that the twist is really what I'm mostly focused on. And feeling that. And how much am I overdoing the neck to try to drag my body into the twist, and can I come up with a harmony there that doesn't feel like too much work in any one particular spot. Okay, we're going to take 2 more breaths. We might have been here a little while. Sometimes I get really into poses and I forget where I am. All right, so we're going to let that go. You can rinse everything out a little bit. Oh. Okay, so we're going to do one more pose. And this one we're going to do in a really super passive, soft way to kind of contrast or counter the poses that we've been doing in a more active way. So this is going to be a butterfly that sort of borders on the tortoise pose. Now in the tortoise, what happens is the legs are placed in this sort of general butterfly arrangement. It's just that the feet are quite further up in front, and you might even, when you fold, thread your arms underneath your legs so that you sort of look like you're a turtle shell with little, the little limbs sticking out from under the shell. Now, I think you have to be pretty flippin' bendy to pull that off. So if that's in your wheelhouse, go for it. If that's I don't know if I want to use that word, but if it's a pose that's available to your range of motion, how's that? Go for it. But for me, you can do just the exact same thing without the arms threaded under. We can just create this kind of rounded back. So we've got this rounded turtle shell kind of back. And I've given my legs plenty of room. And you can weave out, like you could even take your feet wider apart if that would work better. For me, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference in that regard. But we're letting the back get very, very round and very soft, and really just letting gravity do the work with this forward bend. And you're going to feel it out and see what happens. Like, notice where the breath goes. Notice how the pose kind of lands in your joints, in your jaw, in your face. We've got about 3 breaths left, yogis. Okay, so with the last breath, fill up with air and hold it. and then come all the way up. Oh, let yourself kind of readjust, re-straighten your back. And you can come to all fours and do some cat-cows that way, or you can do some little seated cat-cows. I'm going to eventually lay on the belly, and I like a little bit of movement in between those two spots. I'm going to let this blanket set off to the side, but if you needed some padding underneath your knees, you could put your blanket under there. So however you decide to do the movement, notice kind of as I start to take this shape, it feels so different than that shape, which I got really used to, right? Holding that pose for a bit and breathing. Just noticing the movement in the spine, how things shift as we go along here. Now I'm going to come to child's pose with a little bit of a wider knee. Now I'm going to do my version of child's pose, which isn't all the way back, and my knees don't allow me to put my hips on my heels. But you can settle all the way back if that's available to you. Now by extending my arms, I'm kind of prepping myself for what I'm going to do in a moment. Now, if when you're in this position where you're in a child's pose and your arms are extended overhead, you feel quite a lot of stretch in your arms or in your upper back, then you don't need to add on to this. Like, that might be enough. So what I'm going to do essentially is I'm going to bring the hips up so that my back from my hips to the shoulders has a kind of resemblance to downward facing dog. This is called the puppy dog pose, and it's meant to be a shoulder stretch in a way. Now there's a couple of variations. In yin there's one called a heart chakra pose, and that is a little more extreme. So I'm going to try to show you the difference between the two. So the knees are in so that you essentially, we're just trying to get the hips pretty close to over the knees. Now in the heart chakra pose, I try to put my heart and my chin on the ground. If the chin doesn't work, then the forehead. And there's a real emphasis on the upper back, trying to come into almost more of a back bendy shape. Okay, so there's almost more of a cobra-like upper back position. With the puppy dog, we're not collapsing so much in the ribs. We're keeping that a little bit more connected, and it's more engaged muscularly. So I'm going to use a couple blocks because I find it helpful, but you can do it without the blocks, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my elbows on these blocks, and I'm going to wind up bending at the elbow so I can target my triceps a little bit more. But I'm going to back my hips up, and rather than let myself collapse, I'm going to kind of create that little bit of length like I would have in downward dog. So I'm connecting through my ribs and allowing this shape to be almost a downward dog, but a kneeling version. So I feel it in my back, but it's a little less sort of like wet sand and a little more engaged. I'm hugging my armpits in a little bit. I'm creating a little bit of structure with my abdominal muscles so that the muscles are a little bit more engaged and helping to secure my core so that the load transfers into my triceps and my upper back a little more smoothly. Okay, so a little bit different shape. Not that different, but a different approach. How's that? Let's take one more breath with our little puppy dog version here. And then to shift out of this, I'm just going to shift my weight forward so that I can come off the blocks with my elbow. And I find that a really interesting version of that shape. And again, what it might boil down to is the approach between allowing and sort of surrendering versus really engagement in the muscle, right? That might be the difference between the two, really, if it boils right down to it. But for me, the experience is quite different, and sort of what I'm left with is quite different. And so see if you notice that as well. Now we're gonna do some cobra shapes, and it's just gonna be inhale, lift into cobra, exhale, come down. What I'll recommend to you is that you use your back muscles and your legs more than you push with your arms, okay? So the arms are here so that when we lift, we can hold ourselves and sort of draw more broadly across the chest and collarbones, and then come down. And I like to do these little like progressive moves back with the hands. So I'll go back about a ½ inch, lift. It just gives me a little more room and a little different stretch across my collarbones. Take them back a notch. Lengthen through the legs, press the legs into the floor, lift. Right. Come on back down. We're going to do 2 more. So lift, lengthen. And then we've got 1 more in our world here. Lift and lengthen. And then come on down. Now we're going to extend the right arm and roll onto the side. And once, oh, I've got to get that way a little bit. I'm in plant territory. Hold on. Oh. Okay, once I'm out of the danger zone and I'm laying on my side, I'm going to try to match this up. Hips on top of hips, shoulders on top of shoulders. I'm going to try to hug in a little bit nice and firm through the side of my waist. We're going to lift this top leg. We're going to rotate it so that it's in an external rotation, right? If I put my heels together, my toes are separated. Now you can float the bottom leg up, or you can kind of press the toes into the ground on that bottom leg. And then we're going to try to make some circles, and what we're going to try to do is keep the torso nice and stable here. So I'm going to try not to rock back and forth with my ribs, but instead hug nice and tight. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of movement, but I'm going to try to minimize the movement here. Now pause, and we're going to internally rotate the leg, okay? So now my toes, if I brought those together, my heels would be separate and my toes would be closer together. The bottom leg can stay more neutral, but this top leg, we're going to circle now in this internal rotation. And again, we're going to try to hold steady right here through the core. And so this gives my hip muscles a little bit of a workout. It stabilizes my core, so that means I'm strengthening the core stabilizers in my body, also known as abs. What's wrong with that? And when you let the leg come down, can you feel how the work has been sort of in this outer hip in a really interesting way? So we stretched this whole area, and now we've asked those muscles to do some work as well. Notice the difference between those two. Like, what does it feel like to work the muscle versus just kind of stretching the muscle? I think both are interesting. So I'm not comparing them to try to suggest one is better than the other. I just think it's cool to notice that there's a difference. Now we've got to do this whole thing on the other side. So normally what I would do is just roll the class to the other side of this, either through the belly and then around. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin 180 degrees so that it's easier, or at least I'm still facing the camera. So I'm just going to go like this and then roll onto my left side. And you might just need to move your screen so that you can see on either side. So again, the same idea. Hips on top of hips, shoulders on top of shoulders. I'm going to hug in through the sides of my waist, so I'm deeply engaging the transverse abdominis. I'm going to lift this top leg a bit. The bottom leg is stable. And then I'm rotating that so that my toes are apart and my heels are closer together if I brought my legs closer together. And then I'm going to circle the leg, which creates instability, and it's working a certain group of muscles. So I'm hugging in nice and snug through the center. It's the last thing we're doing before Shavasana, so it's fun to kind of re-engage and kind of feel these muscles that are deep stabilizers. Now pause, and then we're going to rotate the leg. Now there's a tendency to let the hip fall. Don't. Keep the hips stable, just rotate that leg bone, and then we're going to circle the leg in the internal rotation. And usually what I do is I try to switch the direction, but if you don't remember the direction, don't worry about it. Just circle the leg. You'll hit the muscle no matter what. Okay? And again, I'm trying really hard to hold myself stable here so that my ribs and hips don't rock around. Good, take one more of those circles and then bring everything together and then just feel like this whole outer hip area, maybe even your abdominals as well. Just noticing how they feel when we've been using them to really do work with the body in a yang fashion versus the yin fashion, which is much more soft and relaxed, just more stretchy, right? And again, not that there's one that's better than the other. I just, even though this is a gentle yoga class, we still have an opportunity to kind of really check in with how the approach to our practice makes a difference in the way that it feels, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. All right, you could gather all the pillows and all the blankets and maybe an eye covering if you're like me and you're in a sunbeam. But we're gonna stretch out for Shavasana, and I'm just kind of organizing, like if my clothes are not exactly positioned right, that's gonna nag at me. So I might need to correct any wardrobe malfunctions I've got going on. And then I'm gonna take a few moments just to sort of rinse out and see. Now, often for me at the beginning of a yoga class, it feels like there's so much tension in the muscles in my hips that my back arches. But usually at the end, it's not so bad. But again, you can put that blanket underneath your legs or pillows under your legs if for you that will help create that sense of letting go. And allowing the shoulders to snuggle in. And there's, again, no right or wrong choices with any of these. It's just a choice. We're making a choice to create an experience for ourselves. And then the important part, the yoga part, is where we pay attention to the experience that we're actually having, right? It's not the choice. The choice isn't the yoga. The choice is the setup for the yoga. And so with Shavasana, the yoga is to be present for allowing the body to completely let go. And not just the body, but also our mind. I'm struggling with my mind letting go right now. And emotionally, I've been troubled as of late. And so I'm also consciously trying to let go there as well. It's all connected, you guys. Now, yogis, we're just going to pause again and notice the breath. Take a breath so deep you can feel it all the way down to your toes. And let it go with a big ah. And then start to wiggle the fingers and toes and get a little more active again. Spread them out. Wiggle them. Spread them out. And then maybe the wrist and ankles. Definitely for me, my wrists. And then stretch. Oh, in any way that seems like a plan to you. Eventually we're going to come to a seated position, but you might want a little back massage before you get there. You can rock yourself up, or you could take a little bit more time with it. When you get there, just pause. So thanks for joining me for this really mindful, gentle yoga class. Hopefully it was enjoyable or interesting. Let's take a nice big breath together. Nice big inhale. And a big sigh. Namaste, yogis. It was delightful to practice with you today. Thank you.